Today, we're going to be talking about Charter First and the changes and impact on your charter school. How many in here have not, or new charter schools and have never received a Charter First rating? Okay, all right. So I'm going to say that's good because the first few of my slides talk about a lot about the reason why we have ratings, what FIRST stands for. So for all you veterans in here, you already know what this is all about. So we'll probably just hop into the comparison of our current rating system to what's going to be happening new for 2020, 2021. If I go too fast on the first few slides before we get to that, just wave a hand or yell at me and slow me down. So this presentation will explain how a Charter First rating impacts your charter school. We'll compare the current Charter First indicators to the new indicator scoring system. So what is Charter First? For the veterans in here, we know FIRST stands for Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. So charter schools and school districts in the state of Texas both receive a financial accountability rating, a FIRST rating. It's a financial accountability rating system. It's separate from school districts. It distinguishes charter schools based on levels of financial performance, provides additional transparency. It enables the commissioner and charter school administrators to provide meaningful financial oversight, and includes future solvency indicators, which also include an analysis of the expenditures and revenues for certain school years. So as we go through the slides, we'll talk about the impact that a Charter First rating has on your school, charter revocations, charter renewals, intervention and sanctions, and the accreditation status. We'll talk about the ratings for the types of entities we have. We have three types now: the nonprofits, which are 501c3s, governmental entities, and institutions of higher education. So the three types of entities all receive ratings from the TEA. We'll talk about the indicator changes, the new indicators, and the revisions to the current indicators that will go into the new system. And we have one revision to an indicator that's currently in proposal and will go to adoption for this rating year, which is 18-19, and that's to indicator 5 and 8, I believe, to back out or for districts and maybe charters, OPEB liability. I think that's more for districts though. We'll talk about scoring and ratings. We have rating and point ceiling indicators. So before, if you remember, currently what we're using now, we're using critical indicators and point indicators. So in the new system, 2020, 2021, we will be going to some ceiling indicators, and we'll get into later and talking about what ceiling indicators mean to your charter.
Can we get that? Is that on this?
So I didn't get to upload it. I'll have to provide it to Josie. I'll provide it to Josie so you can have a copy. And then you can also email me and I'll send you a copy too. Yeah. We'll talk about the change in the ratings determination, the scoring from this rating year and the next to 2020, 2021. So some of the impacts, the renewal of the charter, you look at 5 years, so any of the 3 years of the 5 preceding school years, if a charter school receives a low academic performance rating, a substandard financial accountability rating, which is a FIRST rating, or a combination of those ratings for any of the 5 preceding school years, the commissioner may not renew and will allow the charter to expire if any of those happen. And this can be found in the Education Code, Chapter 12. Revocation of charter, a substandard FIRST rating could result in a revocation of charter. So the commissioner shall revoke the charter of an open enrollment school if the charter holder has been assigned an unacceptable performance rating, which is your academic rating, for 3 preceding school years, a substandard FIRST rating for 3 of the preceding school years, or a combination of both of the rating systems. There's intervention and sanctions. There's a lot here, but the commissioner can impose certain interventions and sanctions on a charter school if the charter school does not satisfy the accreditation criteria under Chapter 39052. The academic performance standards, those are your academic ratings or your first ratings. If considered appropriate by the commissioner on the basis of a special accreditation investigation, if that investigation warrants an intervention or a sanction, the commissioner may also impose that on the charter school. Intervention and sanctions, some of the interventions the commissioner could impose, it could issue a public notice of the deficiency to the Board of Trustees. The commissioner could order a hearing conducted by the Board of Trustees to notify the public of the deficiencies in the charter school. The commissioner could order a hearing to be held before the commissioner or the commissioner's designee, at which that time the Board of Trustees would go before the commissioner and explain the deficiencies in the school and pretty much a corrective action plan. The commissioner could arrange for a monitoring review of the school, appoint an agency monitor to participate in and report to the agency on the activities of the Board of Trustees. I call them the agency's eyes. Appoint a conservator to oversee the operations of the charter school. Appoint a management team to direct the operations of the charter school. If the charter school already has an accredited warn or probation, is already in that status and fails to satisfy any of the requirements under 39054, the commissioner may appoint a board of managers to exercise powers and duties in place of the Board of Trustees. Number 9, for 2 consecutive school years, including the current year, if a charter school has received an accreditation status of accredited warn or accredited probation and fails to satisfy the standards under 39054, or has failed to satisfy the financial accountability standards as determined by the commissioner, the commissioner may revoke the charter school's accreditation or order the closure of the school. So those are some of the impacts that a substandard charter first rating may have on a charter school. And then this is information about the accreditation status. In determining your accreditation status of a charter school, the commissioner will evaluate and consider the performance on achievement indicators and the performance on first indicators. A charter school that is not accredited may not receive funds from the agency or hold itself out as operating as a public school in the state of Texas. So now let's get into the 3 types of entities that receive ratings through the first financial accountability system. Institutions of higher education. We have our governmental entities and our nonprofit entities, which are our 501c3s. So for our institutions of higher education, under Education Code 39082 in E1, this is where it's enabled in statute, where the Texas Education Agency will provide a rating for institutions of higher education. In 19 TAC 109.1001G, the indicators and the calculations are there. And currently, institutions of higher education will be rated on 7 indicators. We have 2 critical indicators, which is your annual financial report. Do we have any IHEs in here? Okay, so let me just skip this slide then. So I guess everybody in here is the nonprofit charter. Okay, all right. So let me just speak to that. I should have asked that first off. So for our nonprofit charter schools and governmental charter schools, the indicators for this rating year, which is 18-19 and 19-20, are the same as you received in the 17-18 year. So we'll be looking at 15 indicators, the same as we did from last year. And those can be found in 19 TAC 109.1001E4. For the 2020-2021 rating year, which will be based on your fiscal year-end data 2020, we have 21 indicators. And those calculations can be found in 19 TAC 109.1001E5. So let's compare for nonprofit and governmental charters. We'll compare, here we compare the new system to the current system. So currently, as I said before, we have 15 indicators. 5 of those are critical, 10 are point driven, and the max score is 100 points. And these are for the 18-19 rating year based on 2018. These are the ratings that you will receive this year. And usually we have those out by August the 8th of every year. And we'll try to send notification at least a week in advance of putting those out for public viewing. We'll send them to CFOs, business managers, basically any contact information we have from Ask Ted. And if you've signed up in Teal for internal user Charter First, we'll send notification and you'll have access to view what your rating will look like before we release it to the public. The current system is also applicable to the 19-20 rating year, and that will be based on fiscal year-end data for 2019. The new system will consist of 21 indicators, 5 of those critical indicators. Those are the same 5 critical indicators that are currently in play. We have 16 point-driven indicators, and of the 16, 4 of those are ceiling indicators. And as I said earlier, we'll talk about a little later in the presentation what ceiling indicators will look like.
100 points again, huh?
And 100 points, yeah. 100 points, yeah. And the applicable years is 2020, 2021, going forward until it's time for us to take a look at it again. In the Education Code in Chapter 39, the commissioner is required to look at the rating system every 3 years. So the last time we did this, I believe, was in 2017, and we allowed for some grace period years using the current indicators that were in place. And so by the time the new system goes into play, it'll be time for us to look at this again and possibly adopt new indicators, yay, or get rid of some of the 21 indicators that we have. That's a double yay. So let's look at the scoring and the ratings. Again, like I said earlier, we have currently critical indicators and point-driven indicators. Going forward, we'll add ceiling indicators for the 2020-2021 rating year. This chart here is just a comparison between the current system and the 2020-2021 system. So for the critical indicators, the top 5, we still have the same 5. The difference is in the auditor's opinion. So in the new system, we've pulled that apart. It's one, instead of it being based on the auditor's opinion and a material weakness, in the new system, it's only looking at the auditor's opinion, whether or not that was unmodified. And then 4 and 5 are ceiling indicators. And then as we look down, comparing what's current to what's new, where you see the grayed out on the current system, those indicators currently do not exist, but they will in this new system. And then we have, looking down, we have the 4 ceiling indicators at number 6, 17, 18, and 21. So as we get into this, we'll go over each indicator and which one is a ceiling and what that will look like. For scoring and ratings, we still have the 100 points. So that's still the same. The difference is currently for a meet standard achievement, 60 to 79 points will garner a meet standard achievement. Going forward, 2020, 2021, it's 70 to 79 points. A substandard achievement rating currently is 0 to 59. 2020, 2021, it'll be 0 to 69 points. Indicator changes. We'll look at the indicators that have no changes, the indicators that have been revised, and the indicators that are going to be brand new for 2020, 2021. So for the 2020, 2021 ratings, I have listed here the 21 indicators. Indicator 1 has no changes. It's the AFR received date. The AFR received date is whether or not you submitted your AFR timely by the due date. It's either November 27th or January 28th, depending on your fiscal year end date. And keep in mind that the AFR received date we use, it's a package deal. So it's a PDF of your AFR as well as the charter data template that could be found on the TEA's website. So the data template is an Excel workbook that provides us with the data from the AFR in an electronic format. That way we provide that information to our programmers, which then we're able to generate the Charter First ratings. In number 2, we'll be looking, it's the auditor's opinion, and as I stated earlier, that one has been revised. Before, it included the auditor's opinion on whether or not the auditor issued an unmodified opinion and whether or not there was a material weakness. So we've separated those two out, and material weakness is now down below as a ceiling indicator. So this one is a standalone now, and it's been revised. Number 3, compliance with debt agreements. There's no changes to that one. Number 4 and 5, those have been revised, not in the terminology, but in the scoring. So there's no score attached to critical indicators. However, there's now a ceiling attached to them. So if you, with these two, they're considered two-part indicators. So if we're looking at the first part and that has a negative impact, and we have to look at the second part in order to get the school past that critical indicator, it's going to bump up into a ceiling. So I call the ceiling indicators a reset, because the way I look at it, everybody's going to start out at 100 points. But once you bump into one of the ceiling indicators, that resets the points to, as in number 4, it'll reset it to a 95. And then number 5, it resets it to no higher than a C rating. In number 6, that's an average change in net asset. That's a new indicator for us and you guys. Number 7, days of cash on hand. No changes to that one. No changes to number 8, which is the current assets to current liabilities. Number 9, that one has been revised. The points for that one has been revised, not the indicator itself. So it's going from 10 to 5 points. Number 10, that's a new indicator. That's the budgeted to actual revenues. And number 11, long-term liabilities to total assets. There's no changes to that one. And number 12, we have the debt service coverage ratio. No changes to that. 13, we have debt to capitalization percentage. That's a new indicator. In 14, the administrative cost ratio, there's no change. Students to staff, no change to that one. In 16, we have an actual average daily attendance to estimated ADA. That's a brand new indicator. In 17, we have the PEIMS to AFR data comparison. That indicator hasn't changed, but the scoring on it has been revised, where currently it's worth points, and going forward, it will be a ceiling indicator. So if there's a variance there, then that indicator will bump you into a ceiling. And number 18 is the material weakness. This is the one that we pulled from indicator number 2 and made it its own indicator. So if there's a material weakness in the audit report, this one is a ceiling indicator. It'll bring your points down. Let's say if you were at 100, I think this one brings it down to a B or a C. And number 19, the material non-compliance, that one's there currently. There's no changes to that. 20 is a new indicator for financial transparency. And then 21, approved geographic boundaries. That's a new indicator. And then adjusted repayment schedule, that one has been deleted. All right, let's just jump right into the definition of each one of the indicators, and let me know if you have questions. I'm just going to keep humming along here. So indicator number 1 is the AFR receive date. Oh, and on these slides, says that, well, there's no higher education entities here, but on the slides up at the top right, there's a little icon. This one has higher education, charter school. Just let you know that this one also applies to higher education. Some of the slides will have change ahead, and some of them will have new, just to let you know that those are changed from current and then the new ones. So number 1, the AFR receive date was the complete, I just had another thought I wanted to say. And these that we're looking at, these are for the 2020-2021 rating year. Okay. Was the complete annual financial report and charter school financial data submitted to TEA within 30 days of the November 27th or 28th deadline, depending on the charter school's fiscal year end of June 30th or August 31st. This is a critical indicator. It doesn't have any score points attached to it. It's either a pass or fail. It's a yes or no response. There's no change to this indicator. So the last conference I was at, I'll just bring up my own question. Someone asked the question of what about the 30-day grace period? So there is a 30-day grace. It's not here because this is what is codified in the Texas Education Code in Chapter 44, not the 30-day grace, but there is a 30-day grace period for charters that do not meet the deadline of November 27th or January 28th, depending on the fiscal year end. So just keep that in mind as you're going forward. But looks like everybody in here probably provides their information on time. So here's a screenshot of where we get that information from. A few of the places that we get it from. This is a screenshot of the audit application. When you upload your information into the audit application, it date stamps when that was received by TEA. And as you can see here, the audit report was received January 18th. I can't see what the fiscal year end was, so we're just going to say that was on time. And then we look over in the AFR data template to determine what the fiscal year end was, as well as looking at the audit report to see what the fiscal year end date was to make sure that that audit report was received by the due date. Look at that. The icon up ahead, there's a change ahead. This is indicator number 2. This is the one that included the material weakness that we pulled apart, and now it's at indicator 18. So this is where was there an unmodified opinion in the AFR on the financial statements as a whole? The AICPA defines unmodified opinion, and your external auditor determines if there was an unmodified opinion. This one is a critical indicator. It's a pass or a fail. There's a yes or no response. And the change to it is that it's now its own separate indicator. So more screenshots of where we extract the information from the AFR data template. We have a worksheet in the workbook that provides us that your charter school answers certain questions. So it provides us with information related to certain indicators. And then we take this and do a comparison to the AFR that you submit in PDF format. Number 3, the indicator compliance with debt agreements. There's no change to this indicator. It's a critical indicator. This one has to do with whether or not your debts that you have incurred, if all of those were paid on time. If there is a default on debt and you've made payment arrangements or there's a forbearance arrangement, that doesn't qualify as a critical fail as long as those arrangements are up to date and current, that you're up to date on your payments. You'll pass this indicator. Again, more screenshots of where we get this information from. This AFR template screenshot is a screenshot of a worksheet that's in the workbook, the AFR data template workbook that we provide to you all. And then the notes in the financial statements. Also, the independent auditor will include notes if there's a default on debt in the audit report. Number 4, timely payments. There's a change for this one, that the charter school make timely payments to TRS, TWC, IRS, and other governmental agencies. For TRS and TWC, it's critical if it's not cleared within 30 days. For the IRS and other governmental agencies, there's no calculation involved. So the change to this one, there's currently a rule adoption to the first indicators that's going to go in place. And for this one, it's also going to allow for, because we didn't put it up there, for the IRS and other governmental agencies, if those timely payments that were not made on time, if those were paid within a 30-day period of time. We didn't have that on there before, so we've included that to be adopted. And the big change to this one is that it is a ceiling indicator. So what happens with this one is, even if you receive a warrant hold, or if there's an issue, and even if it was cleared within the 30-day period of time, the fact that you received a warrant hold will adjust your score. You could be plugging along at 100, but if you bump up into this one, it's going to adjust your score to 95. So then you're resetting and starting out at a 95. Screenshots of where we get this information from: the AFR data template, from the worksheet in the template, and then from the notes to the financial statement in the audit report. Number 5, this one also has a change. This one is total net asset balance. What's the total net asset balance in the statement of financial position for the charter school greater than 0? If it was not, it's a 2-part indicator. So if it was not, that would fail. You would receive a fail for this indicator. However, it's a 2-part indicator. So we look at the change in students. So we look at student growth over 5 years, and was that 7% or more. And for this one, if we have to look at that second part, then it's going to bump into a ceiling, and the rating overall can be no greater than a C rating, which is a meets. Number 6, this one is new. This is the average change in net assets. Was the average change in total net assets in the statement of financial position over 3 years less than a 25% decrease, or did the current year total net asset balance in the statement of financial position exceed 75 days of operational expenditures? This one is a ceiling indicator. It's a 2-part indicator, so if we have to go to that second part, which is the 75 days of operational expenditures, it's going to bump it down from whatever the score is to a ceiling of a B. And let me just say this about the ceiling indicators. For ceiling indicators, it is the lesser of the two. So let's just say, for instance, I'll go back to number 4, where it resets at a 95. Well, if the scoring indicates that your score is at a 90, just because that says a 95, your score is a 90. So it's the lesser of what the actual score is and what the ceiling indicator says it's going to be. I just want to add that because I don't think that's in here on the slides. Number 7, this is the days of cash on hand. This is the same indicator that we've had for the last couple of years. It's the number of days of cash on hand and current investments for the charter school sufficient to cover operating expenses. The calculation uses expenses excluding depreciation. There's no change to this particular indicator. And number 8, no change to this indicator. It's the current asset to current liabilities indicator. We measure the current assets to current liability for the charter school to see if they're sufficient to cover short-term debt. And this one still has a range of 0 to 10 points. Number 9, this is a new one. This is the indicator itself didn't change the description. The points just changed from 10 to 5 points on this indicator. That keeps us in our 100-point range. So did the charter school's revenues equal or exceed expenses excluding depreciation? If not, was the charter school's number of days of cash on hand greater? So this is a 2-part indicator where if you have more expenses than you have revenues, then we go back and look at the number of days of cash on hand calculation in order to see if points can be given for this particular indicator. Number 10, this is a new one, budgeted to actual revenues. Did the charter school average less than a 10% variance when comparing budgeted revenues? This is from your October snapshot data to actual revenues. This is mid-year data for the last 3 fiscal years. And this one is a point-driven indicator as well. For this one, for 2020, 2021, this indicator right now, we're going to start looking at the fiscal year in data 18, 19, and 20. So I know you don't have what your 20 data would look like, but you have 18. So if you want to take this and play around with that calculation just to kind of see what that's going to look like. This one is already has data that's currently in play. When we came up with these indicators, we used historical data just to see what it would look like. And using historical data, it looked all right. Like not a lot of schools received 0 points on this one. Everybody was looking good at 10 points. But now that we're into actual years and using actual data, we can start really seeing what that would look like. Number 11, long-term liabilities to total assets was the ratio. This one didn't change. This one is the ratio of long-term liabilities to total assets for the charter school sufficient to cover long-term solvency. This one also is a 2-part indicator where we look at the change in student membership over 5 years, whether or not that was 7% or more. And then for new charter schools, if there's a negative impact after the 5th year of operation is when we start looking at the second part of the 5 years to 7% for those charter schools that are new. For number 12 is our debt service coverage ratio. This one hasn't changed. Was the debt service coverage ratio sufficient to meet the required debt service? This one is still 0 to 10 points. 13 is a new indicator, another debt indicator, debt to capitalization ratio. Did the charter school have a debt to capitalization percentage that was reasonable for the charter school to continue operating? And this one is a 0 to 5 point indicator. What's not up here is the scale that we have for reasonable. So standard, industry standard, what's reasonable is a 1 point or 1.5%, but I don't have ours here with me. So I'll have to email you those to Josie. 14 is the administrative cost ratio. This one hasn't changed. This has been around for a while. Was the charter school's administrative cost ratio equal to or less than the threshold ratio? This one has a range of 0 to 10 points. 15, we have our student to staff ratio. This one hasn't changed. Did the charter school not have a 15% decline in the student to staff ratio over 3 years? We look at total enrollment to total staff. If the student enrollment did not decrease, then there's an automatic pass for this indicator. 16, this is a new one. This is actual ADA to estimated ADA. Was the charter school's actual average daily attendance within 10% of the charter school's estimated ADA? And this one is a 0 to 5 points. So this one, we're going to get information, work with Dina Black and get information from her on the ADA that's reported to begin with, to determine how that looks estimated to actual, to see if there's a variance there. This one is so new, and our data looks good for now. So this one we may have to talk about in the future once we apply it in real terms as an indicator. So keep in mind, I just want to remind everyone that part of 19 TAC 109.1001, there's an appeals process. So, we'll follow that if it gets down to it. And then we'll look at when we get to, the plan is when we actually get there and start looking at this, if we just have a large amount of charters that don't, I have 10 minutes, okay. Charters that don't do well on this indicator or any the new ones, then we'll put it back out there for review and comment. 17, this one hasn't changed. It has changed. It's a ceiling indicator. The indicator itself hasn't changed. This is one of the older ones from the last few indicator ratings systems that we've had. This compares your PEEMS to your AFR data, and we look for a 3% variance. This one has a ceiling. If the variance is, the absolute total variance is greater than or equal to 3%, then this one will bump into a ceiling, which the most you could get is a B for this one.
Do we know what PEEMS submission or what report's being used for that?
I don't have the report number, but the mid-year submission is what we will use. I do have a crosswalk of the, or a chart of the actual reports that we use that we'll pull from PEEMS. I can provide that to Josie so she can provide it to you. So you will know which reports we're getting this information from. 18 is material weakness. This is the change that's pulled from current indicator number 2. So this one is a ceiling. If there is a material weakness, this will bump to a C. So let's say if you're plugging along at a 95 and we get to 18 out of 21 indicators and there's a material weakness, then this is going to bump it down to a meets. And then this is a screenshot of where we get, where we'll get that information from, the AFR data template and the audit report. Indicator number 19, this one hasn't changed. It's, did the external independent auditor indicate the AFR was free of any instances of material noncompliance? So this one is a point-driven one. It's 0 or 10 points. Again, another screenshot of where we get that information from. Number 20 is financial transparency. And this one is new. Did the charter school post the required financial information on its website in accordance with government code, local code, Texas Education Code, and statute? So
It's just new this county because we already had to do it.
this, yeah, you already had to do it. So
We just didn't count.
yeah, we just didn't have it as an indicator. So I do have a list of some of the required postings. I can also provide that to Josie as well. But for this one is, let me see if there's a screenshot on here. For this one, there's a question in the AFR data template that's simply a yes or a no. Did the charter school post the required financial information on its website? So we're not going to check the website. We're not going to ask for the information, just simply yes or no. But I can provide a list of some of the required financial information that's required for the websites. 21, this is our last indicator, approved geographic boundaries. This one is new. Did the charter school serve students that reside within its approved geographic boundaries? For this one is also a ceiling indicator. And the last one, so if you're, again, humming along at a superior, and if it's discovered through this indicator that the charter school was serving students outside of its approved geographic boundaries, then this one will bump to a B rating, which is above standard achievement. Useful links, which will be real useful when I make this slide show available. These hyperlinks will be live. We have links in here to charter first ratings, the administrative code, the AFR submission information, the AFR data template, the financial accountability resource guide, and other correspondence. If you are not signed up, this to the administrator address correspondence is very important. That's how we communicate that the ratings preliminary and the finals are ready to be released or have been released. So if you would go out to the TEA website and sign up to receive the to the administrator address letters, that would be good. And other correspondence that TEA sends out to administrators also come through that form, as well as on the TEA website. You can sign up for different listservs for different divisions at TEA, just to stay up to date on what's going on and the communications from those different divisions. And then contact information. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.